Good morning.
Goedemorgen.
Guys and girls, this morning we got technology to work for us. So what we were supposed to do 2 weeks ago, we will be doing this morning. And we've got Beana with us. Beana, good morning.
Morning, Jan. Morning, Mariska.
Goedemorgen.
So how are you this morning?
Good. Can't complain.
May I tell them that you only took 20 minutes to do everything?
You can tell them technology was not on my side this morning. So I just followed stupidity.
Beana had an hour failure on setting her alarm clock, but at least you are with us this morning. So my wife wants to grab my water. So I want to ask you a few questions. I know your story, but I know a lot of people needs to know your story.
Yeah, I think this morning it's all about resilience.
Yep.
Because I think if you hear the Beana's story, resilience played a big part in you still being in New Zealand.
My main question at the end of the day probably will be, why didn't you go back? We are glad you are here. But it would have been so much easier just to give up.
Yeah, it would have been so much easier. I gave this a lot of thought the past month. I was really thinking about sharing my story, and I realized that my story is not the only story that people needed to show resilience or just not give up. And I've been reading a lot of posts on social media about the new immigrants really suffering to adapt and missing home. And I hope my story can bring some hope and encourage other fellow, shall we say, survivors to share their story as well, so that we can create an environment where we are aware of everybody's situation and you feel less alone, because you are not alone.
Yeah.
We've been through hell and back, and yes, why we didn't go back. I think the answer to that question is when we decided to come originally in 2010, we made plans to come, and then I found out I was pregnant. And so the whole thing was put on hold, and then I had another baby, and then I had another baby, and then we were sort of settled. And then in 2018, we got shot at in our driveway, in our home in South Africa, 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And that was sort of the final straw that broke the camel's back. It was like, now we've waited too long. We've become part of the statistics and we need to leave. And it's a very catch-22 situation. Like everybody knows, you need a job offer to get a job, but you need a job to get a job offer. So it's really, really hard. So it took a whole year to finally get a job. Got a job in most beautiful town in New Zealand, in Queenstown. And we were ready to leave. Everything then fell into place rather quickly. It was April, I got the job offer. July, we arrived. So it was really quick. And then when we arrived at the airport...
What type of job did you get? Because that's a medical in its own as well.
Okay, I am a florist. I've been a florist since 2005. I've done countless weddings and not so many funerals, but some. And just events, baby showers and bachelorettes and whatever else. And so I got a job as a florist in Queenstown. And I was very excited. And it was a big move. We came with Emirates, so we had 47 kgs per person, and that's what we brought. So when we arrived in Auckland, the domestic flights is doesn't allow that much baggage, so we had to courier that down. It was quite expensive to get us all down to Queenstown because we arrived in the school holidays and it was winter and it was expensive.
Yeah, and for that, Queenstown is on the South Island, so it had to go from Auckland to the South Island.
Yes, it's far. It's like 1,400 kilometers or something from Auckland.
Yeah.
But the lady picked us up at the airport that I was going to work for. And when I saw her, like my heart skipped a beat. I'm like, oh gosh, we just have to get our residency because this is gonna be odd. She literally looked like a witch. And I believe to this day that she is a witch. Like not in the sense of, you call some people witches. She's literally satanic and a witch, and it was tough. So for the first 6 weeks, everything went fine. She really loved us, loved my work, sang our praises on social media, and then we went to church, and then everything turned pear-shaped. The next day, I couldn't do anything right. I was so anxious, and then 2 weeks later, she told us she couldn't afford us anymore, and I was without a job. And just like that, everything that you planned, that you thought you're going to do for the next how many years, just vanished into thin air. Fortunately, we've got quite a bit of family in New Zealand. So my cousin flew down to help us pack the little bit of stuff that we've bought over the past 8 weeks. And we hired a van, and we needed to get up back to Tauranga and start looking for work. It cost a lot of money to move everything back up. And we also lost our bond in Queenstown because we couldn't give 4 weeks notice, which was $2,800 that we lost.
Yeah.
So there we were, unemployed, without a visa, essentially, in the country. I think we had 30 days after you lost your job to find another job.
Yeah.
It was so stressful.
And it's not as if there's millions of forest jobs available all over the country. It's probably a very scarce job as such as.
Very, very scarce. And that was pre-COVID, so they weren't as desperate for people as they are now. Like now you could do anything that's not necessarily in your trade, but you have some sort of experience in. But back then it was tough. Unfortunately,
Have you thought at that stage to give up?
Why didn't I give up?
No, have you thought about giving up at that stage?
No. I sometimes wonder if I'm too stupid to realize I'm suffering.
You like me.
Yeah. I know the circumstances is not ideal. I know this is not perfect, but I'm forever the optimist. Maybe something in my wiring, I don't know. But I was crying a lot. I was stressed a lot. I was suffering from severe migraines, from anxiety. I was vomiting from migraines. It was terrible. Had an interview for a job about 2 weeks after I lost my job for a florist team leader, merchandiser role in Tauranga, which I really wanted because we really wanted to be in Tauranga. We've always loved this area. But they already had somebody else in mind. Daphne could see it. Yes. Back then I didn't know Daphne, but she was offered the role, and they wanted somebody in Auckland as a florist team leader because I didn't have one. But what that meant was that role didn't exist, so they had to create it, advertise it, and all of that takes time. They have to prove that there is no other suitable candidates and whatnot. So this all took 3 months.
Yeah, you were still on a visitor's visa, so it's not like you can.
Normal visa.
Normal visa, still on my work visa. Yeah.
You can chop and change jobs.
No.
Easily. Every time you change your visa as well.
Yes, had to apply for a whole new visa. So that took 3 months that we were unemployed, and we've used all our savings, and we were literally on the grace of God. There's countless people to this day that has paid money into our account that I didn't even know their names to this day, that heard our story, and they were just willing to help. So finally got my visa, and it wasn't smooth sailing as well. They wanted financials from the company, and it was a multi-billion-dollar company which didn't want to give their financials and whatnot. So it wasn't smooth sailing, but got it at the end. And then I landed up with a boss that's a narcissist. I've been self-employed all my life, so I've never had to report to a boss. So then my first experience of my boss was a witch, and the second one is a narcissist.
Oh my word.
And she would phone me to do something, and my whole body would just turn to jelly, and my heart would skip a beat, and I would feel like the dumbest person on earth. It's like my brain just really went numb. I couldn't think when she was talking. I was so anxious for a whole year. And right after I started working, we went into lockdown. So again, the security of a job was up in the air, because we sell flowers. It's not an essential thing. It's a luxury item.
My wife thinks it's essential, by the way. So
It is essential, yeah. Very essential. So yeah, that was our first year. And then we survived lockdown, and I thought, well, we're gonna make this. It's gonna be okay. And then in the next year, January, out of the blue, my son started having seizures. In the middle of the night, and his first seizure, I was alone at home. Rolf started working 4 a.m. in the mornings, and he was already at work, and he forgot his cell phone at home, and I had no way to reach him to tell him what's happening. I eventually phoned the company, hoping somebody would answer in the middle of the night. So I got hold of his boss to tell him, listen, we're going to the hospital, and Keanu is seizing. So I must say, the hospital that we were at, the doctors we were at, was so good. They really went above and beyond. But because it was his first seizure, they didn't prioritize it because it could have just been a once-off.
Yes.
Yeah. And then 11 days later, he had another seizure, and quite a big one, 2 in a row. And watching your son seize, it feels like you're aging 10 years in a second, and you have no idea what's happening. It took a couple of months to figure out what is happening and to get the medication right. But we managed to do that. But at that point in time, I was like, really, just more and more. It's not stopping. And all the while, I've got this manager who just doesn't care. You have to be available for your kids, but you also have to be available for her, because apparently flowers can die, and it's a life-threatening situation, and you need to be on top of it. And it was brutal. It was absolutely brutal trying to manage a work-life balance. And my history is I've been self-employed, so I was always there for my kids, and the guilt that you walk around with not being available when your kids need you. And also my salary was really, really skimpy, and my husband's as well, so we were really struggling to make ends meet. There were just never enough finances to do anything other but just survive. All our friends around us are going on trips and enjoying restaurants and trips, and we're literally just feeling like survivors. I started baking for our church's coffee shop to earn a little bit of extra money, which meant the weekends, which I already didn't have, was even more consumed by baking, just so that we could survive financially, because another $100 or $200 a week just made all the difference. And that was our finances for the first 4 years. We were literally living from paycheck to paycheck, and more often,
paycheck.
yes, when I had a paycheck, a very skimpy one, but it was there. And we lived in Auckland then, so Auckland is expensive, the rent is expensive, traveling is expensive because it's big. I traveled 70 kilometers a day. It was literally survival mode all the time. And it's exhausting. And it wasn't like that back home. Financially, we may not have been better back home, but we had more support.
That's right.
You have grandparents that help, and there was just such a big safety net back home, which we didn't have. I remember the first December, I was like shocked about how long the school holidays are and how expensive the school holiday programs are for children. And we met these gorgeous people through people that we met in Tauranga. It's like a long story how we met them, and they asked like, what help do you need? And I'm like, I just need somebody to look after my children for the school holidays. And she said, yeah, she's good to look after them. And thank goodness they literally left 5 minutes from us, because it's Auckland. They could have lived literally an hour away from us. So every morning I dropped my kids off there, and Alitia just looked after them and became their second mom, because I was just working. It was dreadful. I had no time. I would leave 7 o'clock in the mornings, get home 6:30 in the evenings, exhausted. We don't have people to do our laundry or clean our houses. It's those little luxuries that you're like, oh gosh, if I could just fly over my maid and just helped me get on top of my house.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was brutal. And then I started working for a new company. Didn't have any leave, and then we got COVID. And we got COVID just with the Omicron outbreak, where we still had to stay home for 3 weeks, and I had no leave. And we haven't managed to save anything since we've used all our savings in 2019. So when we had to stay home for 3 weeks, we were paid by the government, which was $600 a week, and then they taxed that. So it was $500 a week that we had to survive on.
The government
Plus,
gives, the government takes.
yes, they give and they tax. How depressing is that? That is just sad. Yeah. So for 3 weeks between Rolf and I, we earned $1,000 a week, and our rent $780. So it was just the one thing after the other. And we fell behind on payments, car payments, life insurance payments. It was just like this constant battle to keep up and get ahead, and we're just not getting ahead. From September 2019, when I lost my job, up until when we moved to Tauranga 4 months ago, we were in a rat race that we couldn't win. It was just impossible to get ahead. And it's really hard not to get depressed and feel like, you know what, stuff this. We're going back home.
Yeah.
I watched this very beautiful video last week. It was so profound about this guy on America's Got Talent. He was born with only an upper body and arms. And his parents didn't want him. They abandoned him, so he ended up in the foster care system. And even the foster system failed him. They bullied him and they didn't want him. And by the age of 17, he was adopted by a woman that finally took him in and loved him like her own. But he had every excuse in the world to become like a complete washout and just, give up on life and give up on people. But he did quite the opposite. He became a acrobat, and he does weights, and he did these stunts on America's Got Talent. And I'm like, how on earth are you able to do something like that with just literally arms and a body?
Yeah.
And on his back, he's got a tattoo, no excuses. And that is his mentality, his outlook on life is no excuses. And I thought that's so profound. Emigrating is like going into a marriage. You don't, well, presumably you don't go into a marriage with the back door open. You go into it with commitment, and you're going to make this work. And immigration is nothing else besides getting married and having children. It's one of the largest commitments you're going to make in your life. And it is a mentality thing. You have to wake up every morning and go, I'm going to do this no matter what life throws at me, because there will be 100 different excuses to give up and give in and just go back. Because yes, the culture is different, the food is different, the schools are different, workplaces are different. They've got this tall poppy syndrome thing, so don't even dare to stand out and be different and be unique, because then they're going to label you. So there are so many excuses to just go, you know what, I didn't sign up for this. But when you left for a reason. You had, and I think the majority of South Africans anyway have very similar reasons why we left. We wanted a safer future for our children. My kids literally play in the street, and I have to call them in at 8:30 in the summer and say, listen, we've got to eat and go to bed. And they're like, but the sun is still shining, because it's so safe and it's so beautiful, and they just play outside. And all I could think of in the past 4 years was that day that we got shot at, and the anxiety that went through my body. And for that whole year, I don't tell a lot of people this, but I was super depressed and anxious. And I had a 1-year-old baby, and Layla had just gone to grade 1. and I was a zero on a contract. Rolf worked 10-hour days and he would come home and it is an absolute mess because I just couldn't function. I unfortunately didn't go for counseling until October that year. So it was 5 months after everything happened that I started getting help. Yeah, but I was having nightmares. I had migraines. I at one point actually Googled how many pills I could take to just end this. And so the starting of our journey in 2018, you have to keep in mind when we immigrated, I was already suffering mentally quite bad. Got help, and thank goodness I did. So my advice to anybody would be, don't suffer alone. We're all here. We've all been through this, and I'm sure there are so many stories out there that's even worse than our story, where you just have to have resilience no matter what, and where you choose no excuses. You're doing this. You want more for yourself. You want more for your children, and no matter how hard it gets, no excuses.
Yeah.
I think the thing is just, and it's the same with you, when you left, you didn't keep that back door open.
You didn't.
Because it's so easy to just turn around and go back when things
yeah.
go south. It's, I mean, in your instance, and
Your stuff really went south. It's not even just missing
very
a mate
quick,
or something like that. I mean,
but the thing is also, we've known Beana now for many years.
from the day that she wrote, basically.
And never ever have I seen you down in the dumps. You always have a smile on your face. You always see the bright side of things, even if it goes. If it's really tough, you still see the bright side, and I think that is a huge thing. And can I ask your relationship with Ralph? Was that difficult during all the struggles, or not really?
No, I actually think people ask me if I would go through this again. I would say yes. It has it's made our relationship so much stronger. He's really become a rock, and you grow. There's stuff that life can't teach you unless you go through this. And money can't buy this. Only life experience can teach me the skill set that I have now. I'm not just talking about resilience. I'm also talking about thinking differently and appreciating stuff that you have, because you realize how hard you've worked for it. It just didn't fall into your lap. It was a battle. And so my mindset, especially the past 4 months, is just one of absolute gratitude. And really, when you struggle, when you go through bad stuff, try to write down what you are grateful for. It just really changes your perspective. And I think that's the biggest thing for immigrants, is having your perspective change, because nothing is like it is back home. It is so completely different. So you also have to change your mindset. You have to change your perspective. And be grateful that you can be here, that you are privileged enough to be in a country where you can raise your children safely. Keanu's test, he's done so many tests and we haven't paid a cent, and we don't have medical aid for him. Everything was covered. Back home, if we had to go through all of those tests, it started in January. By April, I assume our medical aid would have been depleted, and we would have still paid medical aid, 7,000 rand a month, and had to pay everything else out of our pockets. So yes, we have so much to be grateful for. Did we lose a lot? Yes. Are we not 20 anymore and starting over? Yes. But despite all of that, our relationship with God has become, you just realize what's your foundation. And I can tell you so many stories of, in the past 4 years, where you look back and you realize you were never alone. They were always the right people in the right place, ready to help. And that's by the grace of God. And I'm so proud of my husband as well. He's grown immensely as a human. And we are better off, even though we may have lost a lot. We are so much better off than 4 years ago.
the one thing about immigration that I can also say is you grow as a person in ways that you never thought you ever would. Eh?
No, no,
Mm.
no. You do get a bit tired if somebody says, "Oh, but you've got so much resilience." I'm like, lady, you have no idea. Can we stop using that word now?
I
I've
can
had
say
enough of this.
when you guys moved from Queenstown to Tauranga at that specific stage, during the day you would post photos from wherever you were, and that was part of the inspiration for me to go and see the South Island. You took the most beautiful photos down there, so
It's
that's
so
the
beautiful.
influence you had on me. So yeah.
If you haven't been, go. It is just gorgeous. I'd love to see it in the summer though.
Yeah, we're going December, so we'll send you photos.
Ooh, can I climb in your suitcase?
The back seat, we have a spot open, so.
Okay.
So, but you've now got residence?
We've got residence. We got a residence in October last year. We've moved to Tauranga in March. And for the first time in 4 years, I feel like I'm breathing. I have the most amazing job. I work from home 3 days a week. I am available for my children. I've got an amazing boss. She is not a micromanager at all. She trusts us to do our job. And so finally, after 4 years, I can say like the pieces have fallen in the right place. And it just took 4 years. It just took 4 years.
Just took 4 years. But if you gave it up in that first year, you would have
not have what I have now.
Yeah.
And then the big thing is that there's probably a reason that we don't even know today. The reason why you should be in Tauranga for one another reason. Probably in time you'll only find out why. So
yeah. Well, when COVID started in 2020, at the beginning of the year, and Queenstown was really suffering, all the businesses there was really suffering. I'm like, oh, thank goodness I'm not a forest in Queenstown in COVID time, because I would have probably lost my job then. And then it would have been really hard to find another job. So you have to trust the timing of everything in your life.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel fair or right when it's happening. But when you look back, you're like, oh, wow, I was protected from that, and that. And that's why that happened.
Way after things happen, if you look at the puzzle pieces, you can see, oh my word, this has been planned perfectly.
Yes, we were protected and we didn't even know it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Beana. It was really good to speak to you, and thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, there's just a few people saying, Karen Blau saying, baie trots op julle. Leandra van Appel saying, thank you. Sometimes you forget why you're here. So, and
write that list when you come. Why are you moving? Put it on your fridge.
It's really easy to sit down. I see that on social media all the time. People sitting down and writing down everything that's wrong with New Zealand. And I know you want to vent, but don't just see the bad.
Just actually like one, what's wrong with New Zealand, and the other one, what's right with New Zealand.
Yeah. It'll be shocking. At least we've got power and water.
You can make a third list. What's wrong with South Africa?
You can make a list in the light.
Oh yes, at least. But we tend to forget. Once we step out, you think, oh, she's better back home. I'm being quite honest. I don't know how I would have made money in South Africa with the current situation that there is. And I'm still running the books for my company there, and I see struggling. They're not doing very well at all. So
no, gratitude list, put it on your fridge. Have a comparison list if that helps you remind why you are here. Pros and cons. You'd be surprised.
That's a very good idea.
Vanita's saying, well done for staying positive. Rosani's saying, thanks, Beana, very inspiring. From our side, it's time for us to greet you, but
yes.
I think tonight, are you home at tonight?
Yes, I am.
All right, Mariska will see that you get some pizzas delivered so that you don't need to cook tonight.
That is awesome. Thank you, Jan.
All right, guys and girls, that was Beana. Beana, thanks for joining us this morning with your inspiring story. And if you
thanks for having me.
And you're struggling, please reach out. I think even if you reach out to Beana, she will be able to talk some sense into you. Okay.
I'll try my very best.
Beana, baie dankie. Thanks a lot.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.